Okay, thank you very much, and thank you for this opportunity to respond to Dr. Sikona's excellent keynote address. And perhaps I can take the opportunity of making a few points of my own as well. As Dr. Sikona said, the scale of climate change implications for Africa is becoming more and more clear. For example, it's estimated that northern and southern Africa are going to become hotter and drier in the future. Changing rainfall will have an effect on water resources. By 2020, between 70 and 200 million additional people may have difficulty accessing reliable water supplies. Dr. Sikona's presentation spoke of the water challenges. In Africa, there are 60 transboundary river basins. Half of those are shared between 3 or more countries. And this emphasises the need for better sharing of these water resources in the face of increasing water scarcity and changes in water supply. In some areas of Africa, maize production could decrease by 20%. The majority of African agriculture is rain-fed, so that has big implications for the rural people which rely on agriculture for everyday living. So, whatever the extent of global climate change, a degree of adaptation in Africa is going to be needed, and I think that was clear from Dr. Sikona's presentation. A 2007 UN Human Development Report identified 5 areas where climate change would affect human development. And again, I think these were brought out as well in one of Dr. Sikona's slides. Reduced agricultural productivity, greater water insecurity, exposure to coastal flooding and extreme weather, greater health risks and dangers to ecosystems were the 5 areas that were identified. But although in broad terms the implications of climate change in Africa are understood, we still need more specific information and evidence. More regionally specific information is important, and the lack of observation data across Africa is critical in this. And also the need to produce better estimates and better models of climate change impacts. But it's not just the impacts of climate change and the effects that it will have on human development, but also what is needed to respond to climate change. The practical solutions. We need more evidence of practical solutions that can be taken. And that will help determine where we should put our effort, our limited resources. Should it be on climate-proofing infrastructure? Should it be on better sharing of water resources, preparing for natural disasters, or increasing the resilience and reducing the vulnerability of communities? What practical solutions can we have that will help us to identify these things? Responding to climate change, it is right to start from the development point of reference, as Dr. Sikona said, considering the development priorities. Good development will itself build resilience to climate change and reduce vulnerability. But this development should be with an added climate change perspective. Probably means added attention to the sectors and areas most affected. Water, agriculture, preparation for natural disasters. It also means looking at reducing the vulnerability of local communities and increasing the resilience of people in those communities. But it also means addressing the links between adaptation and low carbon development and growth. Looking at these together, as Dr. Sikona outlined in his presentation very well. And that's low carbon development from an energy perspective, bearing in mind the great energy needs across Africa. I think that was shown in one of Dr. Sikona's slides there. But also low carbon development in terms of emissions from forests and other land uses. So that means looking at where development, low carbon and adaptation come together. What might be called climate compatible development. And also as Dr. Sikona said, Africa's development presents great opportunities for climate compatible development in the future. The title of this opening session is National and International Policy and Linking Policy to Practice. And national and international policy does need to integrate and mainstream climate change into policies and strategies, taking a holistic approach, again as Dr. Sikona said. But to truly cope with climate change, that also needs practical actions on the ground, and actions that produce results. And exploring innovation, I think, was one of the key points that Dr. Sikona made in his presentation. And learning from that experience, we can then feed that back into policy, replicating and scaling up in the future, and helping ensure the coherence between international, national and local policies, as we just saw in the presentation. I'm looking forward to the presentations and the discussions in the symposium over the next few days, because I think that will help us learn from some experience and practical action which is happening on the ground that we can use and then build back into national and international policies. I'd just like to say something about some of the assistance that the UK and DFID has been able to provide for climate change and development, some of which features in various ways during the course of the symposium. We've been able to provide some startup support for the Africa Climate Policy Centre that Dr. Sikona is now head of, bringing his wealth of experience on climate change and development. We've been pleased to do that. We've been pleased to provide support for the Climate Change Adaptation in Africa Research Programme, which provides some funding for the AfricaAdapt Symposium and process. We also provide support for CDKM, which is co-sponsors for some of this symposium as well. We've also provided some other work at country and local level. An example of that is a programme which we have with Care International, the Adaptation Learning Programme, and I think some of the experiences coming out of that will feature in the symposium as well. We're also helping to generate more evidence, regional evidence on the impacts of climate change through a regional climate change programme in Southern Africa. So, to sum up some of my thoughts in response to Dr. Sikona's presentation, I think the implications of climate change for Africa are clear. More evidence is needed, more detailed information and evidence is needed at a regional and sub-regional and practical level. Starting from a development perspective is the right approach, building climate change into that development. And we need to pilot and test approaches and feeding the results of that into national and international policy. And I hope that I trust that this symposium this week will provide some good experiences and examples that we can all draw on and use in the future. Thank you very much.